And when you see your inner child and your adult self as two separate beings, then inner child healing sort of becomes a thing that you do before returning back to who you are as an adult. And I found that there's a lot of freedom in actually looking at it as a form of integration. And even above that is, instead of doing inner child healing, I think it's important to like redefine what adulthood means to us. Hello, and welcome to another installment of Jasmine Turns on the Camera with no context of what she's going to talk about. Hello, my name is Jasmine Kylene. I'm a spiritual counselor, I'm a journalist, I am a girl doing literally her best with what she's got. And yeah, welcome to my video. Welcome here, where you are. Welcome. I hope you are well or doing as well as you possibly can be given the circumstances of being human during this time period, particularly if you're in America. I'm just so sorry. But yeah, I am feeling talkative, I'm feeling inquisitive, and I kind of wanted to just turn on the camera to talk about something that has been at the forefront of my mind recently. But before I get into that, if you feel called to, please subscribe. If you're already subscribed, thank you for doing that. That was very kind of you. So obviously, as a spiritual counselor, I do a lot of one-on-ones and a lot of, sessions. And what's been coming up for literally every client that I've worked with recently is inner child healing, which like sacral chakra healing and inner child healing are both at the forefront of what I think is my dharma on this planet, to really push forward what it means to self-liberate in terms of our relationship with our own sensuality, and also just how are we nurturing and healing that inner child within us that wants so badly to be held and validated. And so one of my most I think popular videos on YouTube is the easiest method of inner child healing, so definitely check that out if it's something that's new to you. But I will say that just within my own personal life, inner child healing has somehow once again come at the forefront. And I realize, and something that I want to immediately validate, inner child healing is not something that you kind of just do once and you coast off of. It's a commitment, it's a lifestyle. Living in alignment with what it means to nourish and honor your inner child is something that is an active choice, and it's an active choice that you make honestly every single day, and it is worth revisiting and looking at again and time again whenever you're called to. And I am totally being called to look at it once again from a new and fresh perspective, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that because I think it's happening to a lot of us, and it has to do with burnout. And whatever part of the world you're in and whatever profession it is that you're working, I think all of us are experiencing some level of burnout, which I want to say that burnout is typically associated with professional work and career, and that's very valid, but I also think that you can be burnt out of being on this healing journey. I think sometimes when we are constantly seeing ourselves as something that is under construction, there's this weight that we put on ourselves to consistently do the work and be the best and journal through every problem that we have and look up the symbolism of every situation and everything and cut ties and put boundaries, and it can be exhausting. So I think everything is cyclical, and there should be phases, there should be rest periods, and there should be periods of hibernation. But outside of that, I think that we are all sort of figuring out how to feel safe and liberated enough to take on more rest, and I think that we should definitely be approaching that from the lens of our inner child. So for instance, I feel like I have been experiencing burnout and just being tired, emotionally tired, physically tired, and just kind of over existing because one way or another, through the conditioning of adulthood, I have begun to sort of source and validate my worth through the lens of productivity and through the lens of the success that I experience within my work, right? And it's beautiful because what I do for a living is what I want to be doing, and it's fulfilling, but I recognize the fact that I see such a large image of what it is that I'm walking towards, and I feel like if I'm not pouring all of my free time and so much of my energy into building that, I'm wasting time. And upon doing some revisiting with my inner child work, I really reflected on the fact that I never really dreamt of labor, which I know is a thing right now, right? Everyone's talking about I didn't dream of working. When I was a kid, I didn't want to be anything when I grew up because it's a construct. It's not a thing that you innately desire. And I know it's a popular thing to talk about now, but I really, really, really want to shine a light on but I really want to shine a light and emphasize that notion because it is really proving to be true recently. I had a limitless amount of energy and abundance when I wasn't forfeiting it to building myself and like doing and studying and creating and working. And it can get really easily depleted when I'm pouring all of that into it, especially because it's not exactly where it wants to go, or at least not all at once, at least not always and consistently and constantly. But I think a breakthrough realization that I had, partly through some mushroom medicine, but also a friend like kind of pointed this out to me, was this idea that sometimes we can see our inner child and like our higher selves or our adult selves as like two separate beings. And when you see your inner child and your adult self as two separate beings, then inner child healing sort of becomes a thing that you do before returning back to who you are as an adult. And I found that there's a lot of freedom in actually looking at it as a form of integration. And even above that is, instead of doing inner child healing, I think it's important to like redefine what adulthood means to us. So an exercise I've done is I've really reflected on my childhood, right? And I've done this through looking at pictures of me as a kid, watching as many home videos as I possibly could, rereading diary entries, looking at the things that I created, and really just reacquainting myself through hobbies that I used to do, through like shows I used to watch and music I used to listen to, foods I used to eat, really like kind of stepping back into the shoes of my inner child for a second to like reacquaint myself with her and feel what it felt like not only to be her, but like what did life feel like when I was living through this perspective. So within that, I pulled 3 key words that would define not only my childhood, but who I was as a child. So to serve as an example, the 3 words that came up for me were imagination, independence, and adventure. And I really want you to do this on your own. I really want you to like, spend some time just, dancing a little bit with your inner child and see like, what words can you pull from what life was like when you were sort of in that space of self-liberation and freedom. And, look at them succinctly, look at them within those 3 words. So for instance, I am obviously currently redefining my adulthood, and because I know what those 3 words meant for me in terms of like what life was like in my childhood, I want to make sure that they're showing up consistently and daily within the reality and the timeline that I'm in right now in my 25 years of age. I hope I'm making sense. I just start talking, y'all. I just start talking and then words come out. But for the first word, imagination, I feel like I have had to, for survival, really abide my life by logic and by rational thinking. And in like marrying this idea that I had to approach life logically, I sort of was told that imagination was a waste of time, right? To like lose yourself in fairy tale and fantasy was something that, should be reserved for play and not for, pleasure. And that's bled into, everything, even my creative expression, right? So I've always been a writer, but nowadays when I write, it's about my feelings and, about beautiful things that I enjoy writing about. But when I was younger, I used to write about fiction a lot, and I would be on fan fiction. Yeah, I used to write Jonas Brothers fan fiction. It was honestly, it's dark, it's daunting, but a lot of people really liked it, and honestly it was such a form of release for me to like get lost in my own world and to create characters and themes and colors and scenarios. And so I want to come back to what does it mean to like create worlds and not see it as a waste of time and see it as a form of output. And independence, right? I think a lot of things fall under the umbrella of independence, but for me, aside from being really independent as a kid, I was an only child. I also, because I was independent, I was my own source of validation, and I'm reflecting on the ways that I outsource my validation nowadays, right? So if I'm doing well on Instagram, if I'm getting a lot of bookings and workshops, if I'm getting a lot of response on YouTube, then I have permission to exhale and say that I am enough and worthy, as opposed to when I was a kid when there was no feedback that I needed. I was just innately my own power source, and I think that that's important to come back to in my adulthood. And so I'm really glad that that's sort of like the center of my objective right now. And lastly, adventure, which has been huge, and that one is one I've really put into like physical practice recently, and it's been just the most healing. But for instance, now in my adulthood, I find that I am at the most peaceful place in my mind when things are structured and planned and scheduled. So like if I go to a friend's house and I say that I have to leave at a certain time because I have a certain thing to do when I get home, I will abide by that no matter what. Even if, you know, a random obscure plan comes up or some sort of pivot happens, I will like stick to the plan that I have and maintain just a really like rigid stance with it. And that is very contrary from who I was when I was a kid, who just flowed with life and made adventure out of every single day. You know, now I wake up at a certain time and I do my meditation for a certain amount of time, and I follow a strict regimen. And I think regimen is very important. I think routine is important. Sixth house, we love her. However, I don't give myself room to get lost and found at all in my routine. I'm so used to what I do always that it has become my comfort zone, and sometimes, you know, I think life deserves to be comfortable, but when you're too nestled in your comfort zone, you don't see anything new and you just kind of get stuck and stagnant. And I realized that that's what was happening. So for me, re-implementing adventure into my life looks like letting my schedule be loosened a little bit. For example, I went to go hang out with a friend the other day, and I was gonna hang out with her for 2 hours. I was gonna come home, finish some stuff that I had to do. Like I had a whole plan. I was gonna eat dinner at home and everything. And she had like an extra ticket to like this bingo night thing. And I was like, oh, well, no, I can't, because, you know, I have stuff to do, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, like I can drop you off there. So when I was dropping her off, the place was packed and there were no parking spaces except for one parking space that was like directly in front of the place. And it was such a good parking spot that I was like, okay, well, it's almost as if the universe is kind of like inviting me to do this. So I'm just gonna park and walk her in, see the vibes, and then come back out. I parked, I walked her in. We saw a couple of other friends that we knew as well. And one thing led to another, and I was just like, okay, I'm gonna surrender to this. I'm gonna let this be an adventure that was far out of my schedule, far out of like the comfort zone of what I like know my life to be, but I'm just gonna do it. And I ended up having really, really, really important conversation, really, really deep laughter. And I felt like such a kid because I was in a new environment. I was outside of like the comfort zone of maintaining scheduled time slots in my life, and I just felt really free. So yeah, so that is like a really small instance that meant a really large thing for me as far as like loosening up my grip on this like adulthood thing and letting life be fluid again, letting life be an adventure again. And yeah, planning out more travel for myself, more staycations, but also just like letting myself explore not only physical things, but also like just I want to explore like different concepts before and make adventures out of that. I have a friend recently who's had this like random awakening and thinks that she's like from Atlantis, and I'm like, you absolutely do have a past life in Atlantis. And like I just been researching so deeply about like the lost city of Atlantis, and I before otherwise would think like, okay, this is a waste of time, this has nothing to do with like work or like, you know, what I, you know, am pouring so much productivity into. But instead I have let myself get lost in researching it. I watched movies and related to it, and it's just been really fun to make an adventure out of like learning again. Like, you know how like when you're a kid, or maybe this is just me, but like when I was a kid I would read books like it was nothing, and then once I got into like the school system where reading was like coupled with standardized testing and like something really like large and heavy, it kind of sucked a lot of the fun out of reading for me. So now when I read, it takes me a lot longer, and as much as I enjoy, there's also something that's like slightly obligatory to it. Like I feel like I need to be reading. So bringing back the fun into things by like removing that like added pressure of like what you're gonna get out of it, what you're gonna do out of it, what are you gonna learn from it, and just like flowing with it is very important. This whole video has been a tangent, and I just want to immediately apologize, but also know that I don't need to apologize because I'm sure there's someone who's taking nectar from this, and I just really want to emphasize the fact that our adulthood can reflect who we want and desire to be in our healed inner child state, right? It doesn't have to be like visiting inner child work and then coming back to living this like mundane, structured life, right? It means integrating the two, because I don't desire to have a life free of responsibility, but I do want to make sure that I'm self-defining success, I'm self-defining productivity, I'm self-defining my worth. So if you're new to this whole inner child healing thing, then the first thing I would say is really to get clear on like what those key words are, and integrate them into your life. And if you can't immediately come up with those keywords, I have some journaling prompts that I think would help. I will read them from my laptop now. What would younger me do with the freedom and resources that I have now? How can I make play a priority? What would younger me think about the way I'm living my life now, and what would they change? What weight have I been carrying that my inner child is tired of, and how could I alleviate her pressure? That was huge for me. What are the fears I'm facing now, and how do they stem from my childhood? What forms of safety, affection, or validation did I need more of as a child, and how can I reparent myself now? And what are my natural talents, and what can I do to nourish them more? So just at least exploring what naturally comes from those answers and letting that be your source of like, okay, what are the keywords that describe my childhood, and how can I make sure that my adult living self is reflecting a life where those keywords are like at the center. So I wrote something recently that had to do with my reflection in terms of like reintegrating my inner child into my adult self, like phase 400, and I wanted to first and foremost read it and then kind of give context to like where it derived from and the lessons I built from it. It's been told at me that growing up means curiosity is killed by productivity, that I should define all that I do by what I receive from it, that time is something foolishly wasted, and that being busier means you are doing life better. But I'm liberated enough to know that my beliefs are my chosen subscription, and for me, wasting time looks like being a divine creature made of sex and stardust and somehow living within man's comfort zone. The comfort zone that glorifies burnout and slavery to autopilot because it's too scared to stop outsourcing its worth and instead derive it from who we are when we aren't cloaked in accolade and accomplishment. Who are you when you aren't hidden behind what you've done and the role that you play for other people? Who are you when you're naked? When your soul is bare, are you anything? Why have you let an antiquated system make you feel uncomfortable with your feral nature and desire? It's easier to be cooperative when what's controlling you is also your source of validation, a disempowering machine that asks of you to forfeit your life on earth to earn a hollow medal only it can crown you. To surrender the pure magic of who you are to upkeep a system that needs you numbed and dimmed in order to continue functioning. I am not afraid of my own nudity, and I won't let an insecure society tell me that I should be. I am my own source of power. My soul is ageless and has never once desired exchanging the preciousness of who I am for labor. The earth that I bloomed from, the lives that live within my story, yearn for freedom, for color, for imagination, for presence, for smelling flavors and asking questions, for exploring the unknown and flirting with people I'll never meet, for getting lost in my own ideas and making friends with animals and elements, for satiating my mind and body alike and adorning my temple with more gold and less cloth. I crave learning for the sake of learning and laughing for a living. I crave saying no and people watching and laying idly and distractionless without justification. Being busy disconnects me from the state of clarity I'm in when I'm led by heart, when I'm not forcing my entire life into a 3x5 algorithm. I was meant to show up when I want to and tuck myself in when I'm done. I no longer see my inner child and the adult I stand in today as separate beings. I see myself as an essence that always was and always will be. I don't ask for a life free of responsibility. I am simply committing to self-defining that responsibility, self-defining security, self-defining productivity. Connection is currency, rest is radical protest, play is productive, worth is innate, liberation is perspective, and living is my one and only objective. So that is kind of like what I wanted to make this video on, which is essentially like how to liberate myself from thinking or being conditioned to think that adulthood means like the death of my inner child and not like the integration of what being a liberated childlike curious creature really means. So yeah, I just really encourage you guys to go on this journey as well to, you know, sort of explore the ways in which you've killed parts of yourself that your inner child found so much freedom and liberation and identity in, and see, you know, where and why. You know, I think it's almost our job and selfish if we don't challenge and question this like matrix way of living that I think feels safer when we aren't liberated within our inner child, because our inner child is going to ask questions, it's going to be inquisitive. So come up with those keywords, dance a little bit with who you knew yourself to be, and see, you know, in what ways can you still live a life that has schedule and has responsibility, but that within that scheduled responsibility there's room for play and laying idly and distractionless, and like not needing to constantly be doing, you know, seeing the gratification that comes with simply being rather than like producing. And if you are embarking on this inner child healing journey and you want some things to work with, I will say that Dalmatian jasper is an excellent crystal to work with, as well as rose quartz. I have mine over there. Oh, I can grab her actually. This is my queen, my icon, my legend. She has done so much for me and we love her. You can also, if you work with animal totems, ladybugs are my favorite inner child healing totems. As far as goddesses go, there are so many goddesses you can work with. Honestly, I think working with Yemaya is dope because she's sort of like the mother goddess, so she can kind of show you like in what ways you need to be, does your inner child need to be mothered? And work with the colors green and yellow, right? So solar plexus and heart chakra. Those are really going to be the spaces that you want to derive that nectar from. So I hope that something in this video made sense. Child, I just be talking, okay? And yeah, and I hope that you're living a life that is honest with who you truly are and what you truly desire. And I wish you all of the best. Sending you all my love. I hope to see you again. Feel free to subscribe. Or visit my website, Jasmine Kylene, if you would like to book a one-on-one with me. I do readings and spiritual counseling sessions. And yeah, you can follow me on Instagram too to see me post stories about bugs that I find around my home. That's all. Have a good one.